If you're really looking for something really earth-shattering and life-changing, um, this probably isn't going to be the presentation for you, but in a way it is, because a lot of people use things on sunflowers that they don't really need to do. So this is a soil fertility thing. So I've conducted quite a bit of research with my team over the recent years, 2012 to 2016, on 27 different farm fields across North Dakota, from Beach to Cummings, from east to west and north to south. So the data we have is recent. It's all funded by the National Sunflower Association, and these recommendations have been out since 2016, so 5 or 6 years. Also, so all these studies were randomized complete blocks. They were replicated. They were split plots so that we could look at both phosphate and nitrogen. We didn't look at potassium because it's kind of a minor concern for sunflowers. You don't really read too much about that being much of a concern. So we just kept our old recommendations. It's not that big a thing. So our main plots were the nitrogen rates, 40-pound increments from 0 to 200, and then we used either ammonium nitrate or agritane treated with urea. Agritane urea, and that was because we had a lot of no-till sites and we didn't want the nitrogen to go away. And in our subplots in 2014, we had 4 rates: 0, 30, 60, 90, and then we didn't have any P responses, and they were massive studies and took forever to do. And so we thought that was a waste of our time and energies, and so we backed off to just 2 P rates with 0 and 60. So we evaluated both phosphate and nitrogen with these studies. So I want to talk about the nitrogen responses first. And this is a response of the eastern no-till sites, and these yields are standardized. And then we took the average of the studies and developed the curve with those. And we did standardize because the nitrogen is not related to actual yield, it's related to relative yield. And if you want to talk more about that, we can do so over the phone sometime, but it's really not a yield-based thing at all, but relative yield. So that's a response, and you can see, I think you can see, is that the laser pointer? Pretty sure it is. Here it is. Okay, so this is not a big curve. You remember the old recommendations? They were 0.05 times yield. So if you had 2,000-pound yields, it would go from here to here. That's the old recommendation. Why don't we use the old recommendation? Because it's junk. That's why we don't use the old recommendation. And so this is what's actually happening in our field. So this is eastern no-till. And our recommendations are based on whether it's long-term tillage or not, and then east versus west. And I think that east versus west is probably understandable, reasonable, if you think about it, because of the environment and soils and things. This is the eastern conventional till. The response is more upright, but it's certainly not that. So again, it's a curve. It's not a linear thing. And then this is the western no-till oilseed, again, standardized yields, and that's the response curve. So those are the kind of responses we have. So we know that nitrogen is related to relative yield and not yield, but it also affects other things too. We have to take that into account when we manufacture our recommendations. So one of the things that growers told us, and we certainly observed in several locations where we had timing of plant growth and winds, kind of like today. And we know that as the nitrogen rate goes up, the susceptibility to lodging goes up a lot. So this is one of our studies at Botno. I could have picked, 10, 12 out of the studies that we did, and we all had major lodging at the higher N rates, but it was all a linear response due to the N rate. And then maybe maybe you understand this or maybe you don't, but in all of our oilseed crops, as your N rate increases, your oil content, your concentration decreases. And I know you get a premium for oil. And I know that if you were unlucky enough to maybe go into a field with excessive soil nitrate already, and then you put nitrogen on top of that without really soil testing or understanding the new recommendations, you can get to a point where the receiving station will actually dock you because you have less oil than what they prefer for their receiving. So it's a monetary thing, and we take that into account with our recommendation. This isn't taken into account in the recommendation, but just so you know, that Sam Markell helped me, and Roger Ashley retired. He was retired when he did this, so he did it, hourly thing, but it was great to have a plant pathologist help me out in Western North Dakota. But we found that the sunflower rust rating went up as the nitrogen rate went up, and we never measured it, but I'm going to say it anyway. But it seemed very clear for me walking through all the trials that we did in areas where there was significant white mold, that there's certainly more white mold the higher the N rate, and that might have been partly due to the increased lodging, or it might just have been just because the leaves are bigger, the canopy is more close together because of the greater vegetation. I'm not sure, but we didn't measure it, but I think that's happening too. So again, that's not tied into our recommendations, but I think the oil and the lodging gave us enough weight that we reduced some of our nitrogen recommendations based on those things. So we use an economic model. It's the original name of it was a return to N model. It's the model that the Midwest Corn Belt states use. It's not yield goal based at all. It's just based on the relative response of nitrogen for the crop. And then, of course, with corn, you're really not thinking about quality, but then we do include quality for our wheat recommendations and for our sunflower recommendations. So this is an example of what we're looking at, what the tables include. If you look at the circular, which, I guess if you have trouble sleeping at night, you can read the circular, but the best way to do it is to use the end calculators. So what we have is a series of response curves. So this bottom one is the low sunflower price at 15 cents. And then this is a higher sunflower price at 24, and now we're probably dealing with somewhere around 30, maybe something like that. But this is the suite of response curves you get with end cost at 60 cents a pound, 50, 40, 30, 20, now dollar a pound nitrogen or so. So the numbers that you see in the circular and the numbers that are given in the recommendations, the numbers in the recommendations are the peak of the curve. It'd be like, here, 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 up here. So that's the peak of the curve. The table itself gives you more information than that, but really what you're really interested in is what the most profitable rate is. So that's how it's constructed inside of it. So this is one of the tables here. So here we're at 30 cents a pound of N, and we're about $1 a pound, $1 a pound of N and 30 cents a pound for sunflowers. This is Western sunflower N rate, long-term no-till oil seeds, and the rate is 78. Now that 78 is based on total known available N. And that's the nitrogen you find in your 2-foot soil core. And it also takes into account, it's already taken into account the no-till there. So you subtract that. I don't think very many people put sunflower, say, after soybeans. It's usually after small grains and after corn. So in the off chance that for some reason you decide to put it in after lentils or something like that, then you take a credit for the legumes also. But most of the time you just take off your soil test from that. So if you go to your home computer and go to my webpage, it's Dave Franzen, NDSU. Select my homepage. On the top right, there's a series of links to the calculators. There's one for corn, there's one for small grain durum, and there's one for sunflowers. So you click on that, and this is what you have. It's a map of the state. It's western, eastern, and then you select a region from the list below. Eastern North Dakota around here, western over here, and then the Langdon area is unique because it has shale, little pieces of shale in about every soil core that you take up there. And that shale has high amounts of mineralizable, non-exchangeable ammonia in it. And so the soil itself acts as a slow release fertilizer, so you don't need as much. So that's why we carved that out. We found that area unique when we were working with wheat, and it's in our sunflower calculator as well. Then there's a little bit of difference between the response curves of oilseed and confection. So that's worked in the calculator also. And then long-term no-till is 6 years or more continuous no-till. And no-till includes strip till, it includes purist no-till, it includes one-pass seeding as long as you're just tickling the top couple inches or so before you seed. That's still considered no-till. It still falls into the same response basket. If you run a chisel plow across that at 4 inches deep, that's not no-till. But if you put ammonia, say, with a knife or very thin applicator so that you're not disturbing much of the soil, then what that shank will disturb, that's still no-till also. So, and then short-term no-till is your transitional piece. That's 1 to 5 years. The biology isn't established yet for whatever is going on with our credit. And then conventional, I think you understand that. And then our sunflower price only goes up to 30 cents a pound. I didn't anticipate when we made this that it'd be higher than that. And our nitrogen cost only goes up to $1 a pound. And I didn't ever consider that the nitrogen cost would go up to $1.20. But you can use a ratio and figure it out from there, or just use the highest prices and then use your common sense to do the plus or minus 20 to determine if you want to go a little bit higher than that or a little bit below that. The organic matter percentage in the soil really doesn't make a difference on the calculator until you get up to 6%. And so from 6 to 7, there's a 50-pound credit. From 7 and above, that's another 50-pound credit. There's only a few soils in the state that are like that, but there are a few. So if you are in a really high organic matter situation, you should take that into account. And then your soil nitrate to 2 feet, that's really, 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 really important. And so put that in previous crops, and then your nitrogen recommendation will go below. And I put in a plus or minus because I don't know everything about everybody's field. And so I give you credit for common sense, even though part of my salary comes from the federal government. I still give you credit for a little common sense. I hope you appreciate that. So use your common sense to figure out exactly what the rate is going to be for your particular farm or part of a farm. All right, so I gave you an example. Here's another example. Confections, Western North Dakota, long-term no-till after corn. Residual nitrates, 50 pounds in the top 2 feet, end cost $1. Sunflower contract is 30 cents a pound. So the rate on the chart is 38 pounds of N and then plus or minus 20 pounds. So that's how it works. Just go to the calculator, click, click, click. It's pretty easy. So what about phosphate? I kind of left that in the dust. So we found the first year we didn't get any response to phosphate at all. We had phosphate in the second year. We only had one site, and it was a site that had over 4,000 pounds of confections that gave us a little bit of economic return, but one site out of 27, that's really not really good. I wouldn't go to Vegas with those kind of odds. So we had soil tests down to 2 part per million and no response to phosphate at all. So it's not on our list. We don't need phosphate if we're in sunflowers. And certainly not banned it, and certainly not broadcast it. Save your money, use it on something else. So potassium, too, pretty simple. If your soil test is less than 150 ppm, you should be applying about 100 pounds of 0.060 an acre. We anticipated that we would see a sunflower deficiency somewhere in our studies, and we always put 100 pounds of gypsum, which is 20 pounds of sulfate sulfur, down in our plots. In corn, we did the same thing in the same years, and there were fields within the same neighborhood as our sunflower studies where we saw, let me see, what was the description from my grad student? The green islands of corn within a yellow sea. And we never saw that with sunflower. You couldn't tell where we put sulfur on, where we didn't. So, and I'm not terribly surprised because we don't see this yet with any of our broadleaf crops, really. So I haven't seen any evidence of any sunflower deficiency in sunflower in North Dakota ever. And so I wouldn't worry about it. And micronutrients, I haven't seen any micronutrient problem on sunflower ever. And I've tested boron specifically on sunflowers, and I just don't see anything. So don't worry about it. So all of that, these are the two summary points. The only nutrient to worry about is nitrogen, and use the nitrogen calculator. How simple can you be? So the extension circular, the one that has all the information on it, is available off my website and off the NDSU extension publications. And the online calculators on the website too. We also have a calculator for iPhones and Androids that includes sunflower as well as corn and spring wheat durum, and they're all in the same app. So just go to your store, whatever it is, your app store, and just put on North Dakota nitrogen calculator or North Dakota N calculator. Find it. It's free to download. National Sunflower Association's paid the bill, so take advantage of it. And just some kudos for people to help with the project. Eric Schultz was a graduate student on this, and he's a BASF Tech Rep in Minnesota. Lakesh Sharma was a postdoc helping on the project, and he's now an extension soil scientist with University of Florida. And John Brecker, a lot of you know him. He's now head agronomist at AgVice. And then Roger Ashley, some of you old timers remember him out of Dickinson. And then Sam Markell, I think he's going to be on the program later on. So thanks for everybody.